I am a fool. That is one thing for certain. Hey, my name is Brian. I'm the founder of Decentralized Systems, and today I have Katrien Herdewyn. Is that how you
Correct.
pronounce your last name?
Yes.
Thanks for joining me.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So I'll start with the first question. I start with everybody. How did you get to where you're at now? You're the owner of your own business. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And you told me it was fashion and nanotech spliced together. I really want to hear how you get to that story and maybe how you got there.
Yes. Well, it's very much who I am or how my trajectory of life went by to end up with the company that I have today. As a little kid, I was always obsessed with shoes. I would sit underneath tables for hours looking at people's shoes without being distracted by anything else. To just look at feet with shoes on. I wasn't surrounded at all by people in fashion or shoes, so it kind of disappeared to the background. We don't really stimulate a passion for shoes in kids. Like there are very few museums and even books about it, especially for kids. So it was more of like I love going to a shoe store. I would play little shoe store in front of the garage with old shoes, but it would never really like go anywhere at that point. I had good abilities in science and technology. My parents were also in that field. So it felt natural that they would push me in that direction over time, and also teachers in school. So when I was 18, I decided to go study engineering. I did a bachelor's in electrical engineering and material sciences, and then a master's in nanoscience and nanotechnology, purely based on interest. I was just interested in as I was studying the fields that are being touched by like nanotechnology to me had something almost magical because it's for those who are not familiar with the field, it's what happens at a very, very small scale. So in normal physics, we know an apple falls from the tree and it just goes down in that direction. When you zoom in on it on a nanoscale, those laws of physics don't apply anymore. So different systems start acting and the principles are shifting. And so that's where there is an entirely separate field in chemistry, physics, electronics that really focuses on this extremely small scale. So a nanometer compares to a meter like the diameter of a blueberry compares to the diameter of the earth. So you're really talking about extremely small. You can't see it, you can't feel it. And for me, that was something like magical where I almost had like the beauty of signs that would come back out together with that more raw mathematical sciencey part of it. So I enjoyed that field. I was interested in it. I was offered to do a PhD in it on solid state physics and magnetism. And when I started in that, it kind of started boiling up again, that passion for shoes. Like at that point, I had some income. So I started buying shoes and I was still very interested in them. I saw them as like little pieces of art that were also functional because there was a lot of physics going on in them as well. Like, especially heels, you walk in them, there is like it supports your body, unlike clothing that is basically a 2D something and you make it 3D by putting your body in it. Your shoes come as 3D and kind of need to fit the volume of your feet, somehow make you feel comfortable and help you walk around better. So I was still very intrigued by them. I found a course in fashion footwear design at the Art Academy, and I decided to apply and get another degree, this time in footwear design. And so as soon as I started studying footwear design, I guess the two of them, my background in science engineering and footwear, kind of started coming together. It was hard to kill one for the other. Like I would start calculating heel heights, experiment with materials, like using my engineering background as I was designing shoes. And so after 4 years of that, after getting my degree in footwear design, and I already had my engineering degree, I decided like it was a good time to just start a company in it, see what happens. I didn't want to give up either fields because I loved both. There are not really that many jobs. At the time I was living in Belgium, so there is really not that much in fashion tech today already. It's very limited in the number of companies, especially if you're talking physical products and not software. So there weren't that many opportunities. And at the same time, like I was I didn't have a house or children or anything, like it was a good time to take that leap and just jump and start a company. And like worst case scenario, it doesn't work out and I use my degree in engineering or footwear design to find a job. Best case scenario, I can do what I really love doing for a long time. And so that was in 2014 that I started Il Agnano. So the name of the company is literally the words elegance and nanotechnology smashed together and pronounced the Italian way. And we're focused on bringing technology to the footwear industry. We have an in-house shoe collection for men and women. It's high-end. It's very European design. It's produced in Italy. And so we integrate nanotechnology in the shoes by means of the lotus effect. So that's one of the very well-known principles in physics in nanotechnology. It's named after the lotus flower, which most people know.
The Lotus Sutra.
Yeah, it's in a lot of cultures, it's an appreciated flower. One of the remarkable things from a science perspective is that if you put them in even the dirtiest pool, like in mud, they still stay immaculately clean. Like the water and the mud just stays on it in little droplets and rolls off. And the reason for that, even though their leaves are very, very smooth, is that if you zoom in on them on the nanoscale, they're actually full of tiny little pillars. And so we mimic that structure on the leather of our shoes so that the shoes become water and dirt repellent, which not only helps you in maintaining them, that it becomes easier, but it also helps in making sure that they last longer, because the water in itself is not a problem, but everything in our environment, in puddles, in the rain, everything that's dissolved in that water that gets absorbed into the leather of your shoes is what damages them.
Wow.
So that's what I'm still doing today, 8 years later, and I'm still loving it.
I have so many questions for you. I think I could talk to you about shoes all day long. I mean, for one thing, if you look at the picture behind me, this is a heart chakra. And it's actually, if you read the Lotus Sutra, when the mind is quiet, the lotus flower blossoms. They're talking about your heart chakra blossoming, when your mind quiets. So, yeah, there's a lot of not only quantum theory around that, but just spiritualism, as far as, following your heart, following what you love. And so it interests me so much that you're actually following your passion and, following your heart. So, which is what I'm doing. So,
Yeah.
one question I have for you, when I was a kid, I remember, we used to wear the most terrible shoes. I don't know how your parents were when you were growing up, but mom would always buy us boys the cheapest shoes. And does it impact toe growth, like certain toes on one side of your foot? Because you hear about especially geishas, and they talk about geishas and how they wear those shoes so small, and it impacts the shape of their foot and everything. You'd have to think that similar things happen when you're buying cheaper shoes and it's not giving your feet room to grow in certain angles and things. How do you guys address that? Do you just address shoes for older public or for kids also?
So we're not focusing on kids, so it's only for adults, but we do pay a lot of attention to fit and comfort. And as you're saying, it absolutely does have an impact. I think kids, their feet grow very fast, so it's important for them to actually wear good shoes. But even at a later age, a lot of the issues that you create by wearing the wrong shoes is not just your toes, it's your knees, it's your hips. And so even in your 20s and 30s, when a lot of the people just basically wear whatever they want or whatever looks good without paying too much attention to, is this actually supporting my foot? You create foot problems that will start coming out at 40, 50, 60, or even later. And not just the feet again, but like entirely your entire body, because it reflects back up as they really support. So having definitely enough room in the toe box, like that's what they call the front of the shoe where your toes are, enough but not too much either. Like not making your shoes full of cushioning is another one, so that they become like weak and can't really support themselves anymore, which you see currently a trend shoes are becoming more and more everyday shoes are becoming more and more like athletic shoes, where for athletics, it makes sense. You're causing a lot of impact when you're running long distances or very hard. But when you wear that every single day and you give extra support all over your foot all the time, your foot itself loses a lot of its strength. It's basically like if you decide to wear a brace around your wrist every single day, over time your wrist, your muscles won't be as fluent and as strong anymore. So in wearing shoes, it starts as a kid, but it goes all the way through the rest of your life. We may have been not paying enough attention as a population in general, with the repercussions of buying shoes that are simply not really good for your feet. And it's not like, you could say like cheap shoes is maybe a broad denominator, because it's really about how well a certain shoe fits for your specific foot. Somehow our society decided that it's okay to reduce two different volumes because most of our feet are different. Like your feet are not identical, your left and right one. And we've reduced that to like one size, but it's a three-dimensional volume, and you're just going to categorize everybody in a shoe size, which makes it only normal that a shoe that fits one person great or a brand that fits one person perfectly doesn't fit somebody else perfectly. And it's not always associated with the price that you pay for it.
Yeah, and I noticed, the trend in the last 10 years is a lot more minimalistic shoes too, because I can't remember the name of the book. It was maybe Born to Run. Is that the name of it's where somebody goes and they spent some time in the South, and there was those Indian tribes that would actually run down deer, where, they'd run for 100 miles and they'd run barefoot over, through everything. And they could tire a deer down and run it down. And so, my brother sent me a copy of that book, and it was really interesting. I read some of it, but I noticed the trend after that was to make more minimalistic shoes, like you said, make sure that as many muscles in your foot are staying active, so it doesn't, your feet doesn't atrophy wrong, and then you're stepping differently and you're impacting your knees and hips. I wrecked my knee in college, and so I've incorporated more yoga into my morning routines in the last 2 or 3 years. And I've noticed that's helped my back problems that I was developing later in life, because I was walking differently, because I had a injured knee. And I don't think it matters if it's an ankle or a knee, right? Or a hip. It's going to impact everything unless you start working on balance. So, one question I'd like to ask is, how do you address balance? Let's say for injuries, maybe on one side or the other. Do you build shoes for each side?
So generally, I think it really came with mass production in the footwear industry, that you just mirror a shoe, like you have left and right, and it's just a mirror of one another. And because it makes sense. However, if you go back all the way to the Middle Ages, the idea of footwear was very different, in the sense that obviously the people who could afford it, they had lasts made of their feet. So a last is the mold around which a shoe is built. And so instead of going to a shoe store, you would have your lasts made. So for your feet, you would go to the merchant and they would have different designs standing there. Like you would basically walk into a store and there were 4 designs. You could pick one, and then that design was made specifically for your feet, which obviously resulted in shoes that are much better. It's not a mass production adaptable model, even though we've been trying, or the industry has been trying to find ways, like for example with 3D printing, to make more customed shoes custom to a person. So often now, while real customization is still very rare, if you have a real medical condition, you can work with an orthopedic shoemaker who will make shoes specifically for you. But that's obviously expensive. What you see now more, and which is also often connects with the 3D print industry, is just the insoles. So you just would take out the insole that standard comes with a shoe, and you replace that with an insole that is really developed for your specific feet or designed for the issues that you're struggling with.
Well, that makes sense. Is El Llano center here in the United States? You mentioned that you were in over in Europe, but are you still in Europe?
Yeah, so I am in California most of the time,
Okay.
but the company is based in Belgium and we produce in Italy.
Okay. So you probably travel between the States and Europe quite a bit then.
Yes, yes,
Is your
absolutely.
largest market in Europe or is it here?
Um, well, it has been varying over the years, especially the impact of COVID and how the markets have responded that. Like Europe had a lot more store closings, like mandatory. In the US, they were lighter. We also had a fairly big market in Asia pre-COVID, but that's also like shifted a little bit. So right now, the US is definitely our biggest market. Yes.
Okay. But the shoes are manufactured in Europe still?
Yes,
Okay.
still manufactured in Italy. Yeah.
So how has shipping prices changed? I asked this about business owners recently in the last 6 months, and shipping, everyone's talking about shipping. I'm just curious to see if how your prices have changed in regards to shipping.
It has, I mean, the impact is overall, I'd say, given that we produce in Europe, is also the energy pricing because Europe is mostly, especially is Italy is mostly dependent on Russia for their energy. So that has definitely impacted most of the raw materials that we use, most of the energy, just the production prices, and on top of that, the shipping. So there has definitely been a shift. We try to like go about it in a more economic way in the sense that we don't work with stores, so we are a fully digital brand. We only sell online, which gives us a certain flexibility in not having to adhere to the typical fashion seasons in as far as we organize our shipping. So we could more look at where the market is going or where it is and kind of base our shipments or bulk shipments on that rather than having to go also for our production, as we usually produce in downtimes of the factories because it's right after the rush that they need to get all the new collections out. It makes it more bearable, but you really need to be, I think, in today's society or in today's market, you need to be inventive or creative, resourceful when it comes to trying to avoid paying for stuff you don't necessarily feel like it's. I mean, it's not that for the customer themselves, they feel the difference in when something costs more in shipping. Like that's nobody wants to pay for that, but somebody has to. So,
Yeah, it's really hard to keep absorbing, especially a
oh,
rising
I
cost.
lost sound, Brian. I
Oh,
don't
you
know what
lost now?
happened.
How about now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, super. So yeah, I mean it's really hard to absorb every cost, especially if you have a rising cost that's still rising. I mean, how eventually it's going to have to go to the consumer. There's really no option there. So I guess we could move on to how many have you ever sold shoes to somebody, or maybe not even shoes, but you know, maybe a turning point that led you to, where you're at now. You kind of covered it lightly, but I'd be really interested to hear especially what got you into the engineering field. Was it your parents? Were your parents scientists or in the engineering field, and that's what kind of motivated you to get there? Or because I have a similar backstory. I just like to hear yours.
Yeah, so my parents are both pharmacists, so they are in the science fields. But I think it was really my grandfather in my case. He was an engineer. And as a little girl, I loved kind of the little math um like problems to solve, to think about them. So he would stimulate me, my sister, and my cousins as like in that direction because he was very passionate about it. And then when the time came for me to choose, my sister was already studying medicine, so that was kind of. I saw her; she's 3 years older than me. I saw her studying that, and was like, "Nah, I don't think that's something for me." And so engineering was the second thing that came up, and I really like I from the first year, I guess I said if I fail at this, if like it turns out that I'm just not smart enough for this, I'll just quit and do something else. But I was very interested in it. And I never missed a class. I think maybe one in the 5 years that I studied because I was really sick. But other than that, I just enjoyed it and I still do. It's something I guess that I am born in a way, given that I was surrounded by family that is interested in it and gave us also the opportunities or see like as a little girl, I would be growing crystals in the freezer just to like see how they with different chemical elements that weren't poisonous. So I was always kind of into stuff like that, and then being surrounded by people who stimulate you in that direction, it made sense.
Yeah, my background is very similar. I went to college to go through a chemical engineering degree, but before that, I was interested in electrical also. I ended up being an electrician for 25 years just because I'm a problem solver too. And, I'm always thinking of ways to solve problems and especially how everything works around you, because it doesn't ever seem like you're getting the full story. Even when you go to college, there's theories about this and that. But like you said, when you look closer, it's like, well, some of those theories kind of break down. And it's like, well, what are we really looking at? And is it the same thing that we're looking at up close versus out here, right? So all of those questions went through my mind. But in my high school years, we were a little bit more destructive. We were working out of a pyrotechnics manual, instead of a college, chemical manual. So it changed a little bit once I went to college. So is there anything you'd like to have anybody know more about your company, how they can get a hold of you?
Well, our website is www.ileniano.com. And you can find like almost everything there, of information. Yeah, we obviously we sell the shoes, but we also are very focused on bringing just more tech into the fashion industry, having this background, kind of noticing, as I was trying to launch Ileniano or launching Ileniano, how the different industries don't really understand one another, like working with engineers and they'd be like, yeah, but this is a logical choice, and having to say, well, fashion isn't logical. Like you can say whatever you want, but that's not what it's about. It's not because it makes you use you would have to stitch less or this or that it's about the visual aspect. It needs to look a certain way as well, and sometimes that requires things that are suboptimal from an engineering perspective. And at the same time, in the fashion industry, most people that work there are not very don't have a very strong technical background. So they will be a little bit scared or a little bit like skeptical about technologies being introduced, not understanding them, thinking it's too complicated. So we've been helping businesses cross the bridge as well. So trying to help with development of prototypes or getting a prototype to a production stage, working with them. With manufacturers to kick it off. So we've been doing both, and also really enjoy doing both. The shoes really puts me in the lane of like footwear, which I've always loved, and the more commercial aspect. And then the engineering side of me still gets triggered when I get to work with clients who wanna create like disrupt the industry, which I'm all for.
Right. Yeah, but it's interesting though that you're kind of bridging the gap between two different industries too. So you always have two different types of clients, huh? Ones that want it to look good and ones that want it to just function and be more durable than any other product.
Exactly. Yes.
Embarrassingly enough, I have probably one or two pairs of shoes that I really like. I have a lot of shoes, but I don't know how. I think most people are probably like that. My favorite pair of shoes are a pair of flip-flops are expensive pair of flip-flops that I wear that contort to my foot just perfectly, and I wear them year round. It actually was just a couple of days ago, and we've got like almost a foot of snow on the ground. And so I'm walking from one place to another, and I just put my flip-flops on, and I was walking, and somebody looked down and was like, "What are you wearing?" I said, "Oh, these are my year-round shoes. I wear these year-round." But it was wonderful having you, and thanks for letting us know how to get a hold of you. Well, I'll keep in touch, and it was nice having you today.
Thank you very much. It was nice being here.
All right, thanks.